It was a rainy afternoon in the heart of the city. The neon lights reflected off the wet pavement as people hurried by, umbrellas in hand. Inside a small, cozy office on the third floor of an old brick building, two detectives sat at their desks, sipping tea and reviewing their latest cases. A sign on the door read, "The Language Detective Agency, solving your word mysteries." Mia, a sharp-eyed woman with curly brown hair, flipped through a case file. "Theo, we've got a new client," she said, looking up at her partner. Theo, a tall man with glasses and a thoughtful expression, put down his cup. "What's the case?" he asked. Mia read aloud. "His name is Mr. Parker. He says he had a big misunderstanding at work. It involved the word file." Theo raised an eyebrow. "File, that's an interesting word. It has multiple meanings." Just then, the office door creaked open. A middle-aged man with short, graying hair and a worried expression stepped inside. He was dressed in a suit, but his tie was slightly crooked, as if he had rushed to get there. "Mr. Parker, welcome," Mia said with a friendly smile. "Please, have a seat." Mr. Parker sat down, adjusting his tie. "I need your help," he began. "At work today, my manager told me to file the reports. I thought he meant to get rid of them, so I threw them in the trash." Theo leaned forward. "Oh no." But file can also mean to organize documents in a folder or a cabinet. "Exactly," Mr. Parker sighed. "My boss was furious. I had to dig everything out of the trash can. It was embarrassing. I don't want to make that mistake again." Mia nodded. "That's why we're here." Words like file can be tricky because they have more than one meaning. "Don't worry, we'll help you figure it out." Theo grabbed a notepad and started writing. "We need to investigate. First, we'll look at the different meanings of file and see how they're used in real-life situations." Mia turned to Mr. Parker. "Before we begin, tell us, are there other words you've struggled with at work?" Mr. Parker hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. The other day, someone asked me to meet the deadline. I thought they wanted me to go somewhere to meet a person named Deadline." Theo chuckled. "That's a classic one. Deadline actually means the last possible time to complete a task." Mr. Parker sighed. "English is so confusing sometimes." Mia smiled reassuringly. "That's why you have us. We'll solve these word mysteries together." Theo stood up and grabbed his coat. "Let's start our investigation at your office. I want to see exactly how these misunderstandings happen." Mia turned to the viewers. "Are you ready to investigate with us? Pay close attention, words can have hidden meanings, and we need your help to solve the case." With that, the three of them headed out into the rainy streets, ready to uncover the truth behind Mr. Parker's word confusion. Mr. Parker led Mia and Theo through the bustling city streets. The rain had stopped, leaving behind the fresh scent of wet pavement. The sidewalks were crowded with people in suits, hurriedly making their way to meetings or grabbing coffee from street vendors. They arrived at a tall glass office building, its sleek modern design standing in contrast to the older brick buildings around it. As they stepped inside, the hum of ringing phones and clicking keyboards filled the air. "This is where I work," Mr. Parker said, leading them past a row of desks. "My manager's office is just down the hall." Mia and Theo exchanged a glance. It was time to investigate. Mr. Parker pointed to a stack of papers on a large table. "This is where reports were." Theo picked up one of the papers and examined it. "And your manager told you to file these?" "Yes," Mr. Parker said, rubbing his forehead. "I thought that meant to get rid of them. So he motioned toward a metal trash bin beside the desk. Mia knelt down and peered inside. "I can see how this happened. File has more than one meaning." Theo nodded. "Exactly. In an office, file usually means to organize documents. But in other cases, it can mean to submit something, like file a complaint." Mr. Parker sighed. "That's what confused me. I only knew the meaning of file as something you use to get rid of things like a nail file." Mia smiled. "That's a great observation. The same word can have different meanings depending on the context." Just then, a woman approached. She had short blonde hair and carried a stack of folders. "Oh, Mr. Parker, I was just looking for you, she said. Are those reports filed yet? Mr. Parker turned red. Not exactly. Mia stepped in. Don't worry, we're helping him with a little language mystery. The woman chuckled. I see. Office language can be tricky, especially for new employees. Theo smiled. That's what we're here for, by the way. What's your name? Jessica, she said, adjusting the folders in her arms. I work in HR. Mia tilted her head. HR Human Resources. Jessica nodded. That's right. Theo turned to the viewers. Here's something interesting. In a workplace, people often use abbreviations like HR for Human Resources. That's the department that handles hiring and employee concerns. Jessica smiled. Exactly. And speaking of HR, Mr. Parker, your manager wants you to meet the deadline by 5 p.m. Mr. Parker's eyes widened. Oh no, I hope that doesn't mean I have to meet someone named Deadline. Jessica laughed. No, meeting the deadline just means finishing your work on time. Theo turned back to the viewers. This is a great example of how words can be confusing if you take them too literally. Mia pulled out her notebook. Let's break this down. File can mean to organize papers, but it can also mean to submit something like file a complaint or file taxes. Theo added, and meet a deadline means to finish something before the due date. Jessica nodded. That's right. And in the office, we also say things like touch base, which means to check in with someone. Mr. Parker chuckled. I always thought that was about baseball. Mia grinned. That's a good guess. A lot of office phrases come from sports or other areas of life. Theo turned to the viewers again. What about you? Have you ever heard confusing words at work or school? Think about it and let us know. Mia stretched. Well, Mr. Parker, I think we've cracked the case of the file of reports, but I have a feeling there's still more to learn. Jessica smiled. Oh, definitely. The office is full of tricky words. Mr. Parker sighed in relief. I think I'm starting to understand them better now. Theo patted his shoulder. That's the spirit, and don't worry, we'll be here to help. Mia turned toward the camera. Stay with us. The case isn't over yet. As they left the office, the detectives knew there was more to uncover. Words were tricky, but with the right clues, any language mystery could be solved. Mia and Theo stepped out of the office building. Walking side by side with Mr. Parker, the city buzzed around them, cars honking, people chatting, and distant sirens echoing through the streets. The confusion in the office had been solved, but the detectives knew that language mysteries often had more than one layer. Theo adjusted his hat. Mr. Parker, do you remember any other phrases or words that have confused you at work? Mr. Parker scratched his head. Well, there was another time when my manager said, let's table this discussion. Mia's eyebrows rose. That's an interesting one. Mr. Parker sighed. I thought he meant we should put everything on the table and talk about it right away, so I started bringing out all my notes. But he actually meant the opposite. He wanted to delay the discussion until later. Theo turned to the camera. Here's something tricky. Table can have different meanings depending on where you are. In American English, table a discussion means to delay it. But in British English, it means to start talking about it. Mr. Parker's eyes widened. Seriously? No wonder I was confused. Mia nodded. That's why learning phrases in context is so important. You need to know not just the word, but how it's used. They walked toward a small park, where people sat on benches and pigeons pecked at crumbs on the ground. Mr. Parker took a deep breath. Okay, here's another one. My coworker once said he was feeling under the weather, and I thought he meant it was going to rain. But actually, he just had a cold. Theo smiled. Great example. Under the weather is an idiom. It doesn't mean anything about the actual weather. It just means someone isn't feeling well. Mia took out her notebook. Let's list a few more tricky expressions people might hear at work. She wrote as Theo spoke. Break the ice. Start a conversation in a friendly way. Think outside the box. Be creative and find new solutions. Hit the nail on the head. Describe something exactly right. In the same boat, be in a similar situation as someone else. Call it a day. Stop working for now. Mr. Parker read the list and shook his head. These all sound so strange when you think about them literally. Mia laughed. That's why they're tricky. Idioms don't always make sense word for word. Just then, Theo's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and grinned. Perfect timing. Our friend Emma works in an international company, and she just invited us to visit her office. She says they use a lot of confusing phrases there. Mr. Parker chuckled. Sounds like another mystery to solve. Mia tapped her notebook. Let's go see what language puzzles are waiting for us next. With that, the detectives and their new friend headed toward their next case, ready to uncover more hidden meanings behind English words. Mia, Theo, and Mr. Parker arrived at a modern office building with large glass windows reflecting the bright afternoon sun. Inside, the atmosphere was busy, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, and colleagues chatting in small groups. Emma, a cheerful woman in her early 30s, greeted them at the entrance. Hey, detectives, welcome to my office. Theo tipped his hat. Emma, thanks for having us. We hear there are some language mysteries to solve. Emma laughed. Oh, absolutely. Our team has people from all over the world, and sometimes things get lost in translation. She led them to a conference room where a few employees were gathered. Mia smiled. Perfect. Let's talk about some common mistakes people make when learning English. Emma gestured toward her colleague. David has a good one to share. David, a tall man with glasses, nodded. Last week, my manager said, we'll touch base next Monday. I thought he meant we would physically touch a base, like in baseball. But he actually just meant we would check in and talk again. Mia chuckled. Great example. Touch base is an idiom. It simply means to reconnect with someone to discuss something. Theo turned to the camera. That's mistake number 1, taking idioms literally. English has a lot of phrases that don't mean what they sound like. Emma nodded. Here's another one people at work often say, I'll keep you posted. When I first heard it, I thought it had something to do with a post, like a signpost for social media, but it actually just means I'll give you updates. Theo smiled. That brings us to mistake number 2, not knowing common workplace phrases. Mr. Parker leaned forward. I have one. The first time my boss said, let's circle back to this later, I imagined us walking in a circle, but he just meant we'd talk about it again another time. Emma laughed. Exactly. That's another tricky one. David snapped his fingers. Oh, and pronunciation mistakes can be a problem, too. I once said live like leave by accident. It completely changed what I was trying to say. Theo nodded. Great point. Some words in English look similar but sound very different. Emma clapped her hands. This is so useful. I wish I had known these things when I first started working here. Mia turned to the camera. And now it's your turn. Which of these mistakes have you made before? Write in the comments and let us know. Theo smiled. Next up, we'll do some fun exercises to help you practice. With that, the lesson wrapped up and the detectives prepared to put their audience's skills to the test. Mia and Theo stood at the front of the conference room, looking at the group of employees gathered around the long table. The whiteboard behind them still had the list of common mistakes they had discussed earlier. Theo clapped his hands together. All right, everyone. Now it's time for a challenge. Mia smiled. That's right. We're going to play a little game to practice what we just learned. We'll give you a sentence, but something is wrong. Your job is to find the mistake and correct it. Emma nodded eagerly. Sounds fun. Let's do it. Theo turned to the whiteboard and wrote, let's touch base after lunch at the baseball field. Mia pointed at the sentence. Okay, what's wrong here? David raised his hand. It looks like touch base is being used literally, but we know it's an idiom. Mia gave him a thumbs up. Exactly. What should the correct sentence be? David thought for a moment. Let's touch base after lunch to discuss the project. Theo grinned. Perfect. 1 point for David. Everyone clapped. Mia wrote another sentence. I will keep you posted on the mailbox. Emma burst out laughing. Oh no, posted has nothing to do with mail here. It should be I will keep you posted on the progress of the project. Mia nodded. That's right. keep you posted means to update someone. 1 point for Emma. Theo wrote the next challenge. We will circle back to this topic by walking in circles. Mr. Parker chuckled. That sounds exhausting. The correct way to say it is we will circle back to this topic later. Mia clapped. Exactly. Circle back means to return to a topic later. It has nothing to do with actually walking in circles. Now, Mia picked up a stack of flashcards. Okay, for this next round, we're going to test your pronunciation. She held up the first card. Liv, David, can you pronounce this word? David hesitated. UH. Liva Theo shook his head. Close, but that's leave. This one is proliv. Like I live in New York. Mia nodded. Don't worry, this is a tricky one. Let's try another. She held up the word den as a hard desert. Emma read it carefully. Des. R. Theo smiled. That's right. Desert is a dry place. Now, what about this one? He flipped the card to reveal dessert. Emma thought for a moment. Oh, dessert, and Mia gave her a high five. Correct. Dessert is a sweet treat. Like cake or ice cream. The group continued practicing different words, laughing at their mistakes, and celebrating their correct answers. For the last round, Mia and Theo challenged each person to create their own sentence using one of the phrases they had learned. Mr. Parker went first. My manager will keep me posted about the meeting schedule. David followed. We'll touch base next week to finalize the report. Emma thought for a moment, then grinned. I will circle back to this email after lunch. Theo gave them all an approving nod. Fantastic work, everyone. You're really getting the hang of these expressions. Mia turned to the camera. Now it's your turn. Write a sentence in the comments using one of today's expressions. We'll check your answers. Theo smiled. And stay tuned next. We'll wrap up with some final words of encouragement. The lesson was almost complete, but there was one last thing left to do. As the final round of the vocabulary challenge ended, the employees of Parker & Co. looked at each other with a sense of accomplishment. The room, which had started with uncertainty and confusion, was now filled with smiles and excitement. Mr. Parker stood up and adjusted his glasses. Mia, Theo, I have to say, this was fantastic. I never thought a simple misunderstanding about touch base could turn into such a valuable lesson. Mia grinned. That's what we love to hear. Learning English doesn't have to be boring or frustrating. It's all about making connections and understanding how language works in real life. David, who had been hesitant at the beginning, nodded. I used to be afraid of speaking English at work because I was scared of making mistakes. But today, I realized that even native speakers mix things up sometimes. Theo chuckled. Exactly. Language is always evolving, and the important thing is to keep practicing and improving. Emma raised her hand eagerly. I actually want to test out what I learned. Mr. Parker, I'll keep you posted on the presentation updates. Everyone laughed, and Mr. Parker gave her an approving nod. I like that confidence, Emma. Mia turned to Theo. Looks like our job here is done. Theo nodded. Another case solved by the Language Detective Agency. David smirked. So, do we get honorary detective badges now? Mia pretended to think about it, then reached into her bag and pulled out small stickers in the shape of magnifying glasses. Actually, yes, you do. The team clapped as Mia and Theo handed out the stickers. And now, it's your turn. Today, we learned some common workplace phrases and how to use them correctly. But remember, language learning is a journey, not a race. Theo nodded. So, don't be afraid to make mistakes. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become. Mia pointed at the screen. We challenge you to use today's expressions in your daily conversations. Leave a comment below with a sentence using touch base, keep you posted, or circle back. Theo grinned. And if you want more fun language mysteries to solve, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next case.